I heard my daughter before I saw her. Not words, not crying. Just this sound, high and broken, like something that used to be a voice but couldn't hold its shape anymore. I was in the garage rewiring a brake light when it hit me through the wall. I dropped everything. She was sitting on the porch steps with her shoes still on, backpack half off one shoulder, and her hands. God, her hands were pressed flat against her thighs like she was trying to hold herself together from the outside. Her lip was split. There was dry blood along her chin she tried to wipe away but missed. I sat down next to her. I didn't ask anything yet. I just sat there. It took 4 minutes before she could talk. I know because I watched the second hand on my watch. Old habit. In the teams, you count everything. Breaths, seconds, distance. You do it so your brain has something to hold on to when the rest of you wants to come apart. She told me what happened. There was a lake house about 40 minutes north of Asheville where the Whitmore family spent their summers. Grayson Whitmore was 16, the same age as my daughter Lily. His father, Preston Whitmore, was the kind of man whose name appeared on hospital wings and university buildings. Old money with a fresh coat of paint. The kind of family that gave generously to causes as long as the causes gave generously back. Lily had been invited to a weekend gathering at the lake house by a girl named Cassidy, who she'd known since middle school. Not a close friend, but not an enemy either. One of those middle-zone friendships that teenagers keep because the social geometry demands it. Saturday afternoon, a group of them went out on the dock. Grayson and 2 of his friends, Connor and a boy everyone just called Reef, had been drinking since noon. When Lily walked out onto the dock to take photos of the water, Grayson grabbed her phone. She reached for it. He held it over the edge. She reached again. He let it fall. She told me the sound it made hitting the water was almost quiet. Then Cassidy laughed. And that was the part that broke something in Lily's face when she said it. Not the phone, not Grayson, but Cassidy laughing. She tried to leave. Reef stepped in front of her. Relax, it's a game. She pushed past him. He grabbed her arm and yanked her backward, and she fell against the dock railing and hit her chin on the wood. Nobody stopped it. There were 6 other kids on that dock. Nobody stopped it. She walked back to the house alone, found her bag, called an Uber, and rode 40 minutes back to Asheville with a split lip and no phone. She sat on our porch for 20 minutes before I heard her. I listened to all of it without moving. Then I asked her one question. Did anyone take photos or video? She looked at me like it was a strange thing to ask. I don't know, maybe. Okay, I said. Go inside. Get cleaned up. I'm going to make some calls. She put her hand on my arm before she stood up. Dad, don't do anything. I'm not going to do anything, I said. She looked at me for a long moment. She has her mother's eyes. That particular shade of brown that looks almost gold in the afternoon light. Her mother has been gone 6 years. Car accident 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. I raised Lily alone since she was 10. I know every expression she has, and right then, her expression said she did not believe me at all. She was right not to. I waited until she was upstairs and the shower was running. Then I went to my office, closed the door, and opened my laptop. I spent 8 years as a Navy SEAL. 2 combat deployments, 1 stint training foreign special operations units in a country I still can't name in writing. When I got out, I didn't go into security consulting like most guys. I went to law school on the GI Bill, graduated, passed the North Carolina bar, opened a small practice in Asheville that handles mostly veterans affairs, civil rights cases, and the occasional personal injury case that nobody else wants to touch. People underestimate that combination. They see a lawyer and think, slow, procedural, expensive. They don't understand that I know how to move fast and quiet, that I know how evidence works from both ends, how to find it and how to present it, and that I have contacts in places that most lawyers don't have contacts. I called a former teammate who now works private investigations out of Charlotte. His name is Victor. And before you ask, no, not that Victor. Different one. I told him what I needed. He told me he'd call me back in an hour. He called back in 40 minutes. There were photos. Connor had posted 2 on his private Instagram before someone told him to take them down. They were already gone from his profile, but they were not gone from the internet. Victor had them. He sent them to my encrypted email. I opened the files. The first photo was of Lily reaching for her phone while Grayson held it over the water. She was leaning forward, off balance, and he was grinning. The second photo was taken moments after she fell. She was on the dock on her hands and knees with blood already on her chin, and Reef had his arms crossed like he was bored. I looked at those photos for a long time. I didn't feel angry. That surprised me, even then. I felt something colder than anger. More specific. I thought about what I was going to do, and I thought about it carefully, the way I used to think through a breach, every angle, every contingency, every exit. Then I picked up my phone and called Preston Whitmore's office. His assistant answered. I told her I was an attorney representing a minor who had been assaulted at the Whitmore Lake property the previous day, and that I was calling to extend Mr. Whitmore the professional courtesy of a conversation before I filed anything. I used my lawyer voice, the one that sounds like I'm not in a hurry, like I have more time than he does. Preston called back in 11 minutes. He was careful on the phone, not apologetic. Careful. He said he'd heard there had been a situation, and that he was sorry if my client had been upset. I told him my client was his son's classmate, that she had a laceration on her chin requiring 2 stitches, that his son and his son's friends had destroyed her phone, and that I had photographic evidence of the incident taken by a participant. There was a pause. What is it you're looking for here? He said. Right now? Just a conversation. My attorneys will need to be involved. That's your right, I said. Of course, once attorneys are involved, I file. Once I file, it becomes public record. Once it becomes public record, I let that sentence end itself. Another pause. Can we meet? He said. We met the following Tuesday at a restaurant downtown that he chose, which told me something about how he thought this would go. Neutral ground that he was familiar with. Home field disguised as neutral. I brought my folder. He brought a man named Elliot, who was his family attorney and looked like every family attorney I'd ever seen. Expensive suit, careful eyes, the particular blankness of someone paid to show nothing. Preston opened by saying that his son had shown poor judgment and that the family was prepared to make things right. He used the word uncomfortable to describe what had happened to Lily. I wrote that word down on my legal pad. My daughter required 2 stitches, I said. She was grabbed, pulled, and fell due to direct physical contact by your son's associate. She lost a phone. She was mocked by people she considered friends. I would describe that as assault and property destruction, not discomfort. Elliot stepped in. Standard insurance adjuster language. We're prepared to offer. I'm not here to negotiate a number, I said. I'm here to tell you what happens next. I laid out the photos on the table. Preston looked at them. Elliot didn't change his expression, but something shifted behind his eyes. What happens next, I said, is that Grayson makes a formal written apology to my daughter, in person. In our home. Connor and Reef each do the same. The cost of the phone is replaced, not the depreciated value. The replacement cost for the exact model. And your son does 40 hours of community service at the Buncombe County Youth Shelter, documented and verified. If any of that does not happen within 30 days, I file. If anything happens to my daughter socially, exclusion, harassment, rumors, anything I can trace back to this group, I file. And I add a claim for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Preston looked at me across the table. He was trying to figure out what kind of person I was. Whether I was performing or whether I meant it. You were military, he said. It wasn't a question. 8 years. Then you understand that sometimes young men make mistakes. I do, I said. I also understand consequences. He looked at the photos again. Then he looked at Elliot. Elliot gave a small nod. We'll need a week, Preston said. You have 30 days, I said. Don't take 30. They took 9. Grayson came to our house on a Thursday evening. He was taller than I expected and less confident. His father had driven him, but Preston stayed in the car, either out of shame or strategy. I didn't know which. Grayson stood in our living room with his hands at his sides and read from a piece of paper, which I had told his father was not acceptable. I told him that before he started. Put the paper in your pocket, I said. Look at her. Talk to her. He looked at Lily. She was sitting on the couch with her arms crossed, and she looked much younger than 16 and also much older. He put the paper away. What he said next, I won't reproduce all of it, because it was between him and my daughter. But he said the word sorry 7 times. I counted. And the last time, his voice broke a little. I don't know if it was genuine or performance. I don't think it matters as much as people think it does. What matters is that he stood in her space and said it to her face. And she got to sit there and receive it or not receive it on her own terms. Afterward, she walked into the door. I stayed in the living room. I heard her say something I couldn't make out. Then the door closed. She came back and sat down next to me. He cried, she said. Yeah, was that real? Probably some of both, I said. She thought about that. I didn't cry, she said. I thought I would, but I didn't. You didn't need to. She looked at the window for a moment. Cassidy texted me. She said she was sorry, that she didn't know what to do. What did you write back? She half smiled, just barely. Nothing yet. Connor came 2 days later with his mother, who was clearly angrier at her son than anyone else in the room. Weave came the day after that alone, which surprised me. He was quieter than the other two. His apology was shorter, but he looked at Lily the whole time. The phone was replaced. New in the box, exactly the right model. Grayson's community service was completed in 3 weeks. I received documentation from the youth shelter director, a woman I'd done some pro bono work for the previous year, which is how I knew she'd actually verify it and not just sign off. Preston called me once more, about 3 weeks after everything was done. I let it go to voicemail. He said something about appreciating how I'd handled things and that he hoped there were no hard feelings. I deleted the message. There's a thing that happens sometimes when you've been trained the way I was trained. You get very good at reading exits. Not just physical ones, but situational ones. You know when something is done. You know when to keep moving and when to stop. This was done. But I want to tell you about something that happened about 2 months later because it's the part I think about most. Lily had started going back to school with her head up. That sounds small. It wasn't. The first 2 weeks after the lake house, she ate lunch alone. She came home quiet. She stopped singing in the kitchen, which she used to do constantly, usually something off-key from whatever playlist she was into that week. I noticed when the singing came back. It came back on a Wednesday morning in October. She was making toast and singing under her breath, and I stood in the hallway where she couldn't see me and just listened. Then she came to me one evening with her laptop. She'd been offered a spot in a summer photography program at UNC Asheville, competitive program, 40 students selected from across the state. The application had required a portfolio submission, and she'd built her portfolio partly from photos she'd taken at the lake that day, before Grayson took her phone. Before all of it. She'd uploaded them from iCloud backup. She got in on those photos. I looked at them on her screen. They were good. Really good. The light on the water, the way she'd caught the reflection of the tree line. She has an eye for the moment just before something changes. You submitted these? I said. Yeah. She paused. Is that weird? No, I said. That's exactly right. She leaned against my arm for a second the way she used to when she was little, and we'd watch movies on the couch. Then she straightened up and took her laptop back. Connor follows me on Instagram now, she said. I didn't accept it. You don't have to. I know. She tucked the laptop under her arm. Dad. Yeah. Thank you for not doing anything crazy. I didn't say anything to that, I just nodded. She went back upstairs. I heard her door close and then, after a moment, music started through the wall. Quiet, a little muffled, the bass barely reaching me. I sat there in the kitchen for a long time. Here's what I want to say to anyone listening to this. Preston Whitmore is still a prominent man in Buncombe County. His name is still on things. Grayson went back to school and is probably going to be fine in the long run, which is how it goes for kids like him. The system is not broken the way people think it's broken. It runs exactly as designed. The people who designed it built exits for themselves. What I learned, what I already knew but confirmed, is that the law is a tool. Like any tool, it does more damage in trained hands. I didn't have to raise my voice once. I didn't have to threaten anything I wasn't prepared to execute. I didn't have to go to the woods. I didn't have to do anything dramatic. I just had to know more than they thought I knew, move faster than they expected me to move, and be willing to go further than they believed I'd go. They miscalculated one thing. They thought I was just a lawyer. They didn't know I was also a father who had already lost the person he loved most in the world. And that when you've already survived the worst thing, the phone call at 11 at night, the drive to the hospital, the conversation with the doctor, the 6 years of figuring out how to raise a daughter alone while your own grief sits in the passenger seat every single day. When you've already survived that, there is nothing a man like Preston Whitmore can do to you that you haven't already survived worse of. They miscalculated that. Lily leaves for the photography program in June. She's been saving money from her weekend job at a coffee shop near downtown, and she bought herself a new camera lens last month. She researched it for 3 weeks, read every review, watched videos, came to me with a spreadsheet. I told her it looked like a good choice. She said, I know. She sounds like her mother when she says things like that. That particular confidence, not arrogance, just certainty. Like the ground is solid beneath her. I don't know what Preston Whitmore told his son after all of this. I don't know if Grayson thinks about what he did or whether he's already filed it away under that weird thing that happened sophomore year. I don't know if Cassie ever got a response to that text. I don't know what Reef is doing. I know what Lily is doing. That's enough. People ask me sometimes, friends, clients, other veterans, what I would have done if I hadn't gone to law school. If I'd just been a regular dad with a regular job and no particular set of skills. I don't have a clean answer for that. I think about it more than I probably should. What I know is this. Preston Whitmore looked across that restaurant table and saw a lawyer. He ran his calculation based on that. Lawyers cost money. Lawyers take time. Lawyers settle. That's the math he knew. What he didn't account for was that I'd spent 8 years in environments where the wrong read on a person gets people killed. And I'd spent another several years in courtrooms learning how systems actually move versus how they're supposed to move. He was working with incomplete information. That's not my fault. That's his. Grayson grabbed my daughter's phone because he'd never once in his 16 years been handed a consequence he couldn't outlast or outspend. Connor took a photo of her bleeding on the dock because it didn't occur to him that a photo could travel. Reef stepped in front of her because he'd learned from watching people like Preston that size and confidence are the same thing. None of them were born bad. They were built that way, one unpunished moment at a time. That's the part people miss when they talk about kids like that. It's not cruelty in the abstract. It's cruelty that was permitted to practice over and over until it got comfortable. Until it forgot that it needed to be careful. I was careful. I am always careful. That's not the same as being slow. What I want Lily to understand, what I hope she's already starting to understand, is that what happened at that lake house was not about her. It was not a verdict on who she is or what she's worth. It was just a group of people who had never been taught to see other people as real, and she happened to be standing there. The world is full of that. You don't become someone who can navigate it by getting harder. You become someone who can navigate it by getting smarter, by knowing what tools you have and when to use them, and by refusing to let someone else's failure of imagination become your permanent wound. She submitted those photos to the program, the ones from that day, from before everything went wrong. She went back into the memory and pulled out what was worth keeping. I think about that more than almost anything else that happened this past year. That's what I mean when I say this story isn't really about Preston Whitmore or Grayson or the 11 minutes it took for a powerful man to return my call. It's about a 16-year-old girl who rode 40 minutes home alone with a split lip, sat on her porch steps until she could breathe again, and then, when she was ready, she got back up. She didn't ask permission. She didn't wait for someone to tell her she was allowed to heal. She just did it. That's the thing nobody tells you about raising a kid alone. You pour everything you have into them, every skill and lesson and hard-won piece of understanding, hoping it lands somewhere useful. And then one day something terrible happens, and you watch them handle it, and you realize the person who got them through it wasn't you. It was her. I just kept the door clear.